So what we're going to do is we're here to expose it, let people tell their story, and let everybody in the public see the horrors of the court system in Suffolk County, New York.
Long Island Backstory with Chief Correspondent Gary Jacobs.
Hi, I'm Gary Jacobs. Welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory, where we film a Cablevision out in Suffolk County, Hauppauge, Islandia, whatever you want to call it. Today's show is a great show. A couple weeks ago, I was in the bookstore, and I found this book called Israel Betrayed. And of course, you see the picture of Hillary Clinton, and as a big supporter of Israel, I said, I really need to read this book. I read the book, and actually come to find out that the author, Alan Skorski, happens to live on Long Island. So of course, I reached out to him and asked him to come on the show. So I'm really honored to have Alan Skorski, the author of Israel Betrayed, as a guest today. Alan's been a political activist for over 30 years. He looks like a young guy. I guess activism is good for him, or eating Dippin' Dots chocolate candy is good for him because that's his other part of his business. Starting as the first pro-Israel student leader at Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan. He served as an advisor to congressional campaigns on issues related to Israel. His appearances have included MSNBC, The O'Reilly Factor, C-SPAN, dozens of radio interviews, including Michael Gallagher's radio show. He's also had a column that's appeared in WorldNet Daily, The Jewish Press, Five Towns Jewish Times, as well as many others. Him and his family live in New York, and welcome to Long Island Backstory, Alan.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And I just want to point out, as you mentioned, while Hillary Clinton is no longer a candidate for president, and probably never run again, the people who supported her are still very much active in the political arena. Her closest advisors were John Podesta from the Center for American Progress and David Brock from Media Matters. Right now there is an organization called Stop the Scalping, I believe it's what it's called, by Brian Maloney from Media Equalizer, and they are finally going after Media Matters, who for decades have targeted Republican and conservative activists and talk show hosts. Media Matters has been at the forefront of trying to lead boycotts against Fox News and other conservative outlets, and finally there is an organization going after them. Now it's relevant here because Media Matters is very active within the Democratic Party. They provide a lot of talking points to CNN and MSNBC. In the book, I point out how Alan Dershowitz, a very noted and respected liberal but a staunch supporter of Israel, pointed out that Center for American Progress and Media Matters are the two David Dukes of the left because of their anti-Israel agenda. And that's why it is so important that we be vigilant in our support for Israel, because it doesn't matter who's in office, the people who work behind the scenes never go away. And in fact, today, the Democratic Party, their constituency, which is anti-Israel, has been growing in influence. At the last presidential convention, you remember the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia, there were Palestinian flags waving inside, Israeli flags being burned outside, and not a peep of criticism from anyone in the Democratic Party. Meanwhile, at the Republican convention, all you heard were speaker after speaker praising our support for Israel, and not only that, the committee that drew up the GOP platform drew up the most pro-Israel platform in political history.
And I'm going to get back to that a little bit further into the interview, because a lot of people say I'm for Israel, and
sure.
and you discussed that in your book. But the first thing I want to ask for our viewers, and I'm a Jew, you're a Jew, and we understand why, although there's some that don't, but why most Jews support Israel. We love Israel. We say we're Zionists. Right. But why should we're still not a huge percentage of the population. Why should somebody who's not Jewish and doesn't have an emotional attachment to Israel, why should they care about Israel? Because I hear people in other countries say, you know what, let Israel fight its own battles. We don't need to lose lives over it. We don't need to get into war. Why should anybody care about Israel?
So first of all, the connection between Jews and Israel goes back thousands of years to biblical times, and that's where there is the emotional connection. But certainly on a moral level. Now, besides Jews, and we'll discuss later about the book, how there are many left-wing Jewish organizations who are actually hostile towards Israel.
Such as J Street.
But J Street is one of the most dangerous organizations, and we'll talk about them as well. But one of the most vocal and active supporters for Israel today are the Christian Zionists, and we can address that also. But besides that, let's say you're not Jewish, you're not a Christian Zionist, why should you support Israel? Support for Israel, contrary to the myth, is not a Jew thing, it's not a Jewish issue. As much as Democrats like to play identity politics, we support Israel, we should support Israel because it's the moral thing to do. America's interests are served by supporting democracies around the world. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. And not only are they the only democracy in the Middle East, but they are surrounded by countries who are the antithesis of democracy, of freedom. There are other countries where they have moderate ideals of democracy, but in the Middle East, you've got the most radical extreme terrorism, hatred of minorities. Christians are persecuted, murdered, massacred, slaughtered. Israel serves as the buffer for all of these radical countries in the Middle East. There are over 50 Arab and Muslim countries in the Middle East. You have Iran, which is one of the greatest threats to democracy and to this country. Israel serves as the buffer. It is in America's interest to support Israel, not only because they're a democracy, but Israel is a world leader in medicine, in science, in technology, in agriculture. Today, African countries which suffer from drought are going to Israel to learn about irrigation. Every technological component in this studio, in this country, in your car, in your cell phone, your computer, all have parts that come from Israel technology and innovation. So there are many reasons why to support Israel beyond how much money can I raise from Jewish groups if I say that I support Israel.
What about the security issue? Because I always felt like, even with Iran, for example, that the U.S. is always, we always say, the U.S., depending on who's the president, is afraid to go in and really do the dirty work that it may take. For example, if Iran has a nuclear reactor, we may hem and haw. And I was always taught to believe that, if they really do get it, don't worry, because Israel's not going to care, and they're going to go in there and get it before they come and attack us. So what about the security?
Sure.
Having Israel, who's partners, and we exchange information with the United States. Right. How important is that? Because somebody may say, well, I don't really care about all this stuff. I can't see it. We're sending money over there, but I want to be safe too.
Right.
So how important is the safety issue for
first
Israel?
of all, remember in 1981, when Iraq was under Saddam Hussein was on the verge of developing a nuclear bomb, Israel took it out. Right. Years later, when America went to war in that region, remember to liberate Kuwait from Iraq's invasion, America acknowledged that thanks to Israel taking out the Iraq nuclear reactor, we were able to go in and push Iraq out. Had Iraq had a nuclear weapon, it would have been much different. Look at the situation today in Korea. North Korea is armed with a nuclear weapon. We don't know what to do with them because they are a threat, and once they have it, it changes your entire battle strategy. Israel provides a wealth of information on all kinds of intelligence that comes from the Middle East because they are fluent in Arabic. If you watch Fox News, for example, they always broadcast what's happening in Arab countries because there's a group, one of my favorite groups called MEMRI, M-E-M-R-I, Middle East Media Research Institute. They monitor everything coming out of the Middle East and they transcribe it. You can see it almost on the news, on the nightly news. Israelis have one of the best security services, intelligence agencies, and they're able to penetrate almost every Arab country, and they keep us aware in this country of what's happening. Today you have Saudi Arabia and you have other Muslim countries that have finally come to the realization that supporting the Palestinian cause just doesn't serve their interest anymore. They know that Iran is such a threat that they are now opening back channels to negotiate with Israel. Right. Donald Trump recently, he made his first trip to the Middle East, went to Saudi Arabia, and flew directly to Israel. That's never happened before. And it's for a number of reasons. Number one, Donald Trump is sending a message to the Arab world that we support Israel and there's no more coddling terrorism like the previous administration. And number two, Saudi Arabia isn't going to care anymore. When Saudi Arabia and when the king of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Jordan and Egypt, all these other countries, when their leaders go to bed at night, they're not worried about an attack from Israel. They're worried about attacks from Al-Qaeda, from Iran, from ISIS, from Hezbollah. They know that Israel has no designs on them, that Israel, in fact, is protecting them. Because at the end of the day, they have the shared security interests. So in truth, while Israel and Saudi Arabia, as an example, have no common values, because Israel is an open democracy, Saudi Arabia is still a very oppressive country, but at the end of the day, when survival is your number one priority, Saudi Arabia knows that Israel is probably the one country they can rely on.
You mentioned, I'm going to jump around a little bit because you mentioned Donald Trump and his relationship with Israel, and that was a lot of his platform was I will be a friend of Israel. And we know he has Jewish, with his son-in-law and his daughter. So, but one of the things he talked about in the campaign was relocating the embassy to Jerusalem.
Right.
And it seems like now that has stopped. So I guess number one is explain why it's important that as a Jew we believe that it should be in the holy city of Jerusalem, and why hasn't he done it yet? And does that disappoint you that he hasn't done it?
So first of all, when he made the promise, the first thing I said was, oh, why did you make that promise? A lot of other candidates have made the promise. It's not something that's easy to fulfill. There are a lot of more issues behind the scenes, and it wasn't a campaign promise that needed to be made. Those of us who support Israel, we're never going to support Hillary Clinton, and we all know that for 70 years, I mean, Donald Trump is 70 years old. His entire life, he's had a good relationship with the Jewish community. His father had a great relationship with the Jewish community. So we knew that he was going to be a friend to Israel, and he had people on his staff, and Mike Pence, who was his running mate, is one of the staunchest supporters of Israel. So we all knew that he would be good even without that promise. It's important because, in politics, symbolism is so important. In the Middle East, even more so. And so to move the embassy there, it is sending a message once and for all that Jerusalem is not negotiable, that we, the United States, recognize that Jerusalem is the eternal capital of Israel. It will always remain so.
And to me, that would send a message. It would be important to me for the U.S. to say that.
It would be. I think, in my opinion at least, that they're going to wait because I think that Donald Trump knows and his advisors know that the Palestinians for too long have gotten away with jerking us around. And when under the last administration, they had an accomplice in the White House helping them jerk everybody around. Donald Trump, I think he took a big gamble talking about he wants to make a deal. I think his advisors know that it's not that the Palestinians are very recalcitrant. They have their own agendas. We saw it under the Clinton administration and under the Obama administration, where you had two-term presidents who were willing to give the Palestinians everything they asked for, or almost everything, and couldn't get a deal. So why Donald Trump is expending so much capital, I don't know why, but I think he wants to give the Palestinians one chance. And if they don't come through, because remember what they kept saying, that if you move the embassy to Jerusalem, no more peace negotiations. So I think Trump is saying, okay, fine, we'll do things your way. We'll give you that chance, but you blow it.
Which they are going to do.
Right.
Of course.
And then they, we gave you your chance.
And you think
so you want it? Then I think because at that point, then there's nothing else left to lose. I think that also, again, it's complicated politically because as much as we have terrorism today, things could get a whole lot worse. And I think that before they move the embassy, which will create a real
But do you think Netanyahu doesn't want, or is he willing to take that risk? I know you're not calling him up, but like, what do you?
I think they want it there, but they're not. But it's not as easy as other things that they're looking for. I think it's much easier to say that we're going to start the negotiations from this point. It's much easier to put down markers than moving the embassy. Now, again, I support moving the embassy. I think Israel can control its borders, but they have to be prepared that there will be a major inflaming of the Muslim streets. And again, I can't tell Israel how to protect their citizens or how to guard their borders. And again, it's a calculation. It should be there, but I'm not going to be the one to push it. That I leave up to the parties to negotiate between themselves.
No, you mentioned that you kept mentioning Democrats. I think it's obvious which side you were voting for. But most Jews historically, and I say most because I believe the number used to be in the 80% would vote Democrat. My whole family growing up was Democrat, and then I think we started to see a trend though over the Obama administration. No surprise that more and more Jews started saying, okay, it's okay to vote Republican. On Long Island, we have Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin, big supporter of the state of Israel. But why do you believe that? And listen, a lot of these Jews support Israel. They say, I love Israel, I support Israel. why? I guess why do they so much 70%? Is that the number in the 70s? Still vote Democrat.
They
and
always
why is
will.
that? Why is that a mistake? Explain to them, that the people who are watching the show, that if you love Israel, why is it a mistake to vote Democrat?
Okay, so most Jews, and this again dispels the myth that back in the 80s, early on, you had people like Pat Buchanan and others who used to say that Jews, their first loyalty is to Israel. I think that the Jewish voting pattern will dispel that myth. Most Jews are not religious. Their support for Israel is conditional. Their first loyalty, first and foremost, is to the liberal progressive agenda. Israel is not, it's up there unless you are a rabid anti-Semite. Jews will stay loyal to the Democratic Party. They put issues, whether it's same-sex marriage, whether it's abortion, whether it's the environment, climate, you name it. That's where their first loyalty will go to. I'm going to give you an example. George W. Bush came into office, and immediately he changed the tone compared to his predecessor, Bill Clinton. He came out very strongly pro-Israel.
But wasn't Bill Clinton pro-Israel?
Bill Clinton's record on Israel was terrible, and now again, going back to Bill Clinton, he's one of the most charming politicians you're ever going to meet.
And I thought, as a Jew, we saw Bill Clinton loves Israel.
No.
He loves the Jews.
I'll tell you a funny story.
His son-in-law is Jewish.
Yeah, right. At the correspondence dinner, Darrell Hammond was the entertainer. And he said that Bill Clinton is the only man who could tell a woman, if you have sex with me, we could end racism right now. And the whole audience started because it's a joke, but people could see Bill Clinton think that way. He charmed Israel the same way he charmed many Israelis. And Israel
didn't Israel love him, though?
Secular Israelis liked him because he was charming and he put on a good show. But looking at the record and the facts, number one, the Oslo Accords were signed in 1993 under the Clinton administration. The terror attacks against Israel skyrocketed to record levels. In his book, The Missing Piece, former negotiator and mediator Dennis Ross wrote how the Clinton administration ignored every violation perpetrated by Yasser Arafat and the PLO because it was more important to Bill Clinton to get a peace deal signed than the ramifications of it.
But we want a peace deal, don't we? So
we want a peace deal, but not at the cost of Israeli lives, and not a fake peace deal. We want a real peace deal. And when terror attacks increase, that demonstrates that the Palestinians really have another agenda, because the more sacrifices that Israel made, the more the attacks. You look at the Gaza Strip. Israel withdrew every last vestige of Zionism, Judaism from the Gaza Strip. Hamas came in, it became a launching pad for terror attacks against Israel. The Palestinians, from whatever segment they come from, whether they're from Hamas or Fatah, their true agenda is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. This is their agenda. There's a group called Palestinian Media Watch, which monitors everything coming out of the Palestinian Authority. They reward people who kill Israelis. They name sports stadiums after terrorists. Their education curriculum calls for killing Jews. They indoctrinate their kindergarten children. Their graduation ceremonies are about kids strapping on bombs and killing Israelis. Their sole objective is the eradication of the state of Israel, and everyone who follows it knows it. Bill Clinton knew it, the Democrats knew it. That's why, again, right now, when Donald Trump sent his son-in-law to Israel, I have no idea what Jared Kushner or Jason Greenblatt are discussing. Maybe it's to try things incrementally, but in my opinion, it's a waste of time. The Palestinians know that the Israelis are willing to make generous concessions and take great security risks. But until they show that they really care about their own people, there will never be peace in the Middle East, at least as far as Israel and the Palestinians go. The rest of the Arab world saying, you know what, screw the Palestinians. They've been fighting with Israel for 40 years, 50 years, and you know what, we've got more important things to worry about. And that's going to be the trend until the Palestinian leaders, listen, right now, when I was in Israel last year, I actually went into Palestinian territory. I didn't go in undercover, but I didn't go in with a yarmulke or showing that I'm Jewish. I wanted to kind of see how the other side lives. And they were all acknowledging how the Palestinian Authority is completely corrupt. They get billions of dollars from the United States, from European governments, and all.
So why doesn't Trump cut that off?
So right now there is a bill called the Taylor Act that Congress wants to pass that will condition support for supporting terrorism with U.S. funding. I think one of the issues that they're concerned about is that if they cut off all aid and the Palestinians go broke, then you're going to have riots in the streets, which they don't want. On the other hand, they are funding terrorism. The money's being stolen. Yasser Arafat stole billions of dollars, put it into his French bank accounts. Mahmoud Abbas is doing the same thing. He lives in a beautiful mansion, and he's paying off his people a lot of money, but the Palestinian people on the ground are not seeing really the benefits of the money they're getting from all these different countries.
Now, most of the politicians will say, quote, I'm a friend of Israel. I mean, who wouldn't say they're a friend of Israel? It's
Right.
politically. I don't know if you want to mention people. How do we know when somebody really is a friend of Israel?
And it's the people who will support Israel regardless of who their president is. Right now, Donald Trump is president, so it's very easy for a guy like Chuck Schumer to shoot his mouth off and support Israel. When Barack Obama was president, Chuck Schumer was silent for 8 years. You had the Iran nuclear deal that Obama wanted passed. Chuck Schumer would not commit to it, and only after there were mass demonstrations by conservative Jewish groups did he finally say, okay, I'm going to vote against the bill, but I'm not going to tell my colleagues how to vote. Never in all the years of Chuck Schumer's activism in Washington did we ever hear him say, I'm going to support an issue, but I'll let my colleagues vote their conscience. Chuck Schumer did not want to oppose it because it was Barack Obama's bill. Had Donald Trump promoted it, you would have seen Chuck Schumer come against it. Someone like Elliot Engel, he's a Democrat, always there for Israel. Caroline Maloney from Queens, who I don't agree with on any issue, and she's one of these also politicians who shoot their mouths off, and she's very hyperbolic. When it comes to Israel, she's always been there for Israel. Kathleen Rice in the 4th District, she's only a freshman, but she's been good and she's been very supportive.
Interesting.
Bob Menendez of New Jersey, unequivocal, unapologetically, he's a hawk on Israel.
I think our Congressman Lee Zeldin, I mentioned
Well,
him
yeah,
earlier.
but Lee Zeldin's a Republican,
So,
and he'll always be pro. Ted Cruz. Let me talk about Ted Cruz just for one moment, him and Marco Rubio. Whenever a politician is a guest of honor at a dinner, they will come out there, they will be the best of guests, they will praise the audience, and talk about how great they are and the wonderful work they do. A few years ago, Ted Cruz was a guest at a dinner, and he started praising Israel and why it's vital that the U.S. supports Israel. Members of the audience start to heckle him and tell him, stop it.
Really?
He told them, you know what, if you're not going to support Israel, I can't support you. And he walked out. When did you ever see a politician ever walk out of an event when they were the guest of honor? That's a real supporter of Israel. Marco Rubio is another staunch supporter of Israel. So there are politicians, Congresswoman from Florida, Ileana, I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, I think is how it's pronounced. She has been also one of Israel's staunchest supporters and defenders. She's retiring after now, I think, 25, 30 years, and we're going to miss her. You now have an Israel Victory Caucus led by Bill Johnson from Ohio and Ron DeSantis from Florida. Their mission is to have a caucus that's devoted to supporting Israel. You will not see that in the Democratic Party. So most Republicans, are hawkishly pro-Israel. Most Democrats, they're there when there's no skin off their back. But if it means bucking the party, there's no moral compunction that motivates most Democrats to support Israel. They do it either out of political expedience, they want the money, or they want the votes. But as far as a moral reason for supporting them, remember, they also have a strong and growing left-wing base that is anti-Israel. They don't want to offend them. We saw that during the presidential campaign. While most Republican debates, or certainly the interviews, always had questions regarding support for Israel, you didn't see that in the Democrat debates. When Hillary was debating Bernie in Brooklyn, of all places, Hillary had a chance to really stand up for Israel. Bernie Sanders shamed her for speaking at AIPAC and not talk about Palestinian suffering. The audience applauded. Hillary didn't say another word. So today, as Caroline Glick, who is a great columnist, as she has written, if you're a Democrat today, supporting Israel will not help you. It may even harm you. Whereas if you're a Republican, not supporting Israel is going to cost you votes. During the presidential campaign, when Sean Hannity was interviewing different Republicans, it didn't matter if it was New York, where there are a lot of Jews, or somewhere in the Midwest where there are no Jews. The audience always applauded whenever the candidates spoke about support for Israel, because Republicans, again, not all, but most Republican voters, especially those who are religious, understand that support for Israel is not a Jew thing. It's about moral clarity. It's about supporting democracies. It's about opposing tyranny, dictatorships.
But really, those should be democratic principles.
They're not. Look at who the constituents are. When you have Occupy Wall Street, Occupy Democrats. When you look at who, their web, all their Center for American Progress, the Daily Kos. These are all left-wing anti-Israel organizations. In fact, in my book, I point out these Democrat think tanks and these left-wing web groups. Again, the Daily Kos being one of the lead ones, very anti-Israel. Media Matters, which again is a very active anti-Republican organization. Also, lots of anti-Israel work you'll find on their websites or in their activism, and that's how they're trying to steer the Democratic Party. Sidney Blumenthal was one of Hillary's closest advisors, and his son Max Blumenthal is really, he is so rabidly anti-Israel that even left-wingers say he's too crazy for us.
So the people who are watching the show, we only have a few minutes left. Who are the people who, because nobody's going to say outright, hey, I'm against Israel. Is there anybody you can think of that is anti-Israel that we should watch out for if we support Israel?
You have Barbara Lee in California. You have Keith Ellison from Minnesota, who was recently named as a deputy DNC chair. He's at a long alliance with Louis Farrakhan. Members of the Congressional Black Caucus, most of them, if will note on most votes regarding Israel, most of them will vote against Israel.
Is there ever, in 2 minutes left, can there be peace in your estimation if we have the right politicians?
Can there be or will there be? Can there be? Listen, I could win the lotto. Will I? No. Will there be peace? Not in this generation, because the generation of Palestinians today have been so indoctrinated to hate Israel with a flaming passion that the concept of peace does not even exist. There needs to be a separation. In my opinion, the way you can have an absence of war. The Gaza Strip, in my opinion, has to go under Egyptian control, which is where Gaza Strip used to be part of Egypt. Let them do with Hamas whatever they're going to do, just like they arrest the Muslim Brotherhood. Let them do whatever they want with Hamas. And as far as the territories right now, Ramallah, they're under Palestinian control, let them form some type of confederation with Jordan. But there will never be a Palestinian state that's accepted by all parties. Jerusalem will never be divided. Jerusalem can never be trusted to be under Arab control. The Western Wall is it is the most holiest site for prayer for the Jewish people, aside from the Temple Mount, and we will never again relinquish that to anybody. So there will never be a true, genuine peace between Israel and the Palestinians.
Right. Alan, thank you very much for coming on the show. Everybody watching, please read the book. There's so much that we didn't get to. I had a list of about 30 more questions that we didn't get to, and I hope to have Alan back on the show again. But the book is available in many places, but you can get it where I got it on Amazon.com. And I hope to see you again soon. So
thank you.
Keep up the support.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. I'm Gary Jacobs. Thank you for joining us on Long Island Backstory. And if you are a supporter of Israel, look, the only way we can get the message out, if you're watching this on TV, on Cablevision, or out in the Hamptons, you can go to YouTube and you can Google Long Island Backstory and Alan Skorski, and please share the show on social media, because the more people that see it, the better. We need this to get spread all across the country, because Israel and the United States have a great relationship together, and we work together.
Todd's a great guy. I mean, look at him. What a sweetheart. Attaboy. Wait, Todd, what are you doing? How totally selfish and un-Todd-like of you. Come on, Todd. Come on, man.